Hi, this is the Ridge Runner with another Pine Home woodcraft moment here. Preparedness and all that good stuff is a good conversation, and we've had a lot of that lately, but I think it's time that we get back to our roots and discussed woodcraft, bushcraft, that sort of thing. And today we're going to have a conversation about wool. Wool is, most people in the bushcraft community are going to agree with you, or woodcraft community. I prefer woodcraft, to be honest. They're going to agree that wool is probably just the thing to keep you warm. And you're going to get some of the guys from the modern backpacking community to say, "Oh, it's too heavy," or "There's better, more advanced fabrics." And I guess there are more advanced fabrics. I don't know if they're better. But what we're going to do, I'm going to pan out here and you're going to see what I'm talking about. Okay, what we have here are two wool blankets. Whoopee, right? What you don't know, and I'm going to tell you, of course, is that wool blankets like these are very hard to come by. They're just not made as much anymore, and when they're made, they are sold at a premium. These were gotten very, very inexpensively. And I'll tell you, there's a couple of places you can get wool blankets and wool clothing and wool everything if you just know how to look and you have some patience and you frequent the places a lot. And those are secondhand stores, antique shops, and of course the Salvation Army. Pardon my dogs, they're going to make noise now because I'm trying to do something. But anyway, that's Guinevere saying hello to you. Anyway, wool blankets and wool clothing in general have an amazing property that even when wet, they keep a large percentage of their insulative capabilities. And so anytime you could pick one of these things up, you should. Now I'll tell you a little story about these. I first saw this one over at... I'm back. My daughter got home. That was why the dogs were barking. Anyway, make a long story short, these blankets and wool in general, just it's something that you really need to experience to understand. Now, these two blankets here, I picked them up at a Salvation Army, actually. I went in there to pick up a gift for my mother, and sometimes I'll find nice things like that there, and nice things there. And I didn't find anything for my mother today. At least not there. I got somewhere else. Anyway, the great thing is I did pick up these wool blankets. I first saw this one, and I was like, "Oh, that's kind of nice. I could make that into something." And it was originally set for $5.99, but they had that 50% off thing with a pink tag, so I got it for 50% off. And while I was looking at this thing and going and ogling this and going, "Yeah, I don't want to spend $5.99, but I should because it's wool and it's hard to come by," like I said. And the decision was already made. I just had to, get used to the idea. And while I was doing that, I knocked this one off of the shelf. And I picked it up and went, "Oh my gosh, this is wool." I thought it was one of those blue thermal blankets, which actually aren't bad either. They're probably the closest thing you're going to come to something, an acrylic that's actually going to perform a lot like wool, are those thermal blankets. They look the same. It's a very similar color to this. And you can look closely, you can see how this is woven, and this is definitely a wool. And you know the difference when you start handling wool and you understand what it's doing. Now, of course, these are not like Whitney blankets or anything like that. But I find, and this was, I think I'm quoting Kephart, but I'm not sure. If I'm wrong, please put it in the comments. But he said that he'd rather have two thinner wool blankets than he would having one thick wool blanket. And the reason being is, and it makes perfect sense if you think about it, because when you have a dead air space in between the two blankets, it's going to end up being a lot warmer. So these two blankets might come together to become a sleep system for me. Because I only spent a little bit of money on them, I'm not going to care so much whether or not I I carry them into the woods and get dirt on them and whatnot. That being said, if I'm really concerned about getting them cleaned, or if you're concerned, if you get them at a Salvation Army or an antique shop or whatever, and they have that musty surplus store antique shop smell, and we all know it if we frequent those places. Most dry cleaners will clean these blankets, and they'll do a nice job on them too. So the next thing I'm going to be doing is embroidering my initials, probably in red here and on the bottom of my other one, this one here too. That way I know they're my blankets. Now this came out, I thought this was just some kind of a crazy thing somebody did and it was an accident, but it turns out it makes a lot of sense. Most people don't like wool blankets going against their neck. Well, somebody used their brain here. They took some linen, and this is linen, and by the way, linen is an awesome outdoor fabric too. It's kind of like nature's, not nature's, but it's definitely the 18th century version of Under Armour, and I'll get to that at another time. But they took this linen, probably off of a sheet or maybe a tablecloth, and they stitched it on here. And what it does is it's stitched on this side here and then rolls over the edge to come back here. And if you look, that's a considerable amount of fabric there. That goes right around your shoulders. That means if you are sensitive to wool, or it just isn't, the itch bothers you too darn much, you're not going to be able to sleep, doing something like this will remove that issue and allow you to enjoy wool for what it is. You know, if you're really concerned over that itch, or if it just gets to you too much, you can also do this all the way around and make a liner for the blanket. That, you know, you can stitch a sheet right on there and then just cut it to shape or whatever you want to do. I'm not a seamstress. I have somebody else do that crap for me. My mother calls it, I learned from my grandfather how to sew, and she calls it leather working sewing, but I know leather workers that know how to sew, and it doesn't look anything like what I do. Anyway, long and short of it is this. I mean, we get, you know, we in the woodcraft community, we desire wool in many ways. This is my new hat. Well, new to me anyway. I formed it myself, and I wanted a Montana Peak hat, and I've wanted one for a while, and I kept finding them, and they either just weren't the right shape or what, or too expensive. So what I did is I made my own, which is what you should do too. You should always try to make your own stuff if you can. And this one here was some other kind of a hat, and I reshaped it over the stove. But the big thing about this is wool. And again, it's not thick wool, but with, you wonder why did you want that high peak? Because I mean, hold on, see if I can show it to you on my head so you can see how high it is. All right, let's try this without. There we are. See how high that is on my head? I hope you can, because I can't see I don't have a monitor to see what I'm pointing at here. But the nice thing about these hats is that they do, again, have a dead air space between your hair, which I don't have a lot of, but it's there, and your hat. And this takes a hat that's kind of thin, and it makes it much warmer than it ordinarily would be. It also insulates you against the sun, which is also a good thing. Keeps your head cooler. So there's that. But again, wool. So obviously we've been using this wool stuff for a very long time now, and it works very well. The big thing is that when you're putting this stuff together, you spend your time. You don't just go out and spend the biggest amount of money you can on the most expensive. Because these wool blankets, if you buy like a Whitney wool blanket, you know, with any kind of points on it anyway, you know, it's a 4-point or 5-point. I don't know the Whitney point system, to be honest. Leave that to the Hudson's Bay Company. But anyway, when you get into those blankets, you're looking at $300 to $400 for a blanket. Now, you're getting what you pay for. If you want one to put on your bed, and you're willing to spend $300 or $400, your grandkids will be putting it on their bed. They are that good. They are warm. They are comfortable. They are well worth anything. Well worth the money. Now, do you want to burn holes in it with next to a fire? Well, that's up to you, depending on your income level. Me, if I'm buying something like that, it's in the bedroom, and that's where it stays. But let's end this out with a really simple thing. If you can find them, the biggest thing you want to keep in mind is that don't worry if you're using it in the woods. Don't worry if there's a couple little holes in them. If there's a big jagged hole, buy it anyway. You can use the material for making smaller things. You can make a set of mittens or a pouch or something like that. There's a lot of ways you can use to make a hat, maybe. Anyway, so the long and short is this: we'll be doing a whole slew of videos shortly about choosing outdoor clothing and gear based on the concept of traditional camping, and that'll be the new segment. So call this the first one of traditional camping gear with from woodlandsurvival.com. And anyway, this is the Ridge Runner. Oh, let me do my spiel. I forgot to do my spiel. Please like and subscribe to our page. It helps us to be able to continue to bring you more content like this. If you're really interested, you can go out and look up woodlandsurvival.com. You can find us on Facebook, and you can find us. Find us, of course, on the web at www.woodlandsurvival.com. Please stop over and see us. We'll be creating a lot more videos. If you have anything you'd like to see, and you're more than welcome to comment and let us know if there's something you'd like us to do. Rick and I will be doing a lot more in the future, and I'd like to say that this will be a different adventure for us. Well, in all, thank you very much, and this is the Ridge Runner signing off.